The other thing too is I'm gonna say something on my end that might be unpopular. If you're on Linux, you're signing yourself up for a more difficult time with really anything you're going to do. And I know the Linux community wants to fight back on that like all day, every day, but I think a lot of things are just more difficult on Linux. You're gonna have less client, you're gonna have less software compatibility with things. Not everything's like that, but a lot of things are. And this is one of those areas. I would really recommend something like a NAS, and that's why I think Linux is kind of like a slippery slope, because now you're on Linux, and now it's like, well, I might as well just use Nextcloud or like a NAS or something else that I also own and control, and before you know it, it's like a full-time job to have stuff like this. It's not always like that, but just saying.
I don't know if this is a hot take or not. So I think that like a lot of maybe old school Linux desktop users are very out of touch with what people use their machines for. And it might be just a matter of needs. Like if you only visit one website, maybe you only browse the old Reddit design in Firefox, and you do nothing else with your computer. Do you really need Firefox to be updated? Maybe not. Maybe that's fine. You can post to Reddit and Hacker News and whatever like text-based forums you want in this browser. But like realistically, there are so many things that people use their desktop for that are very like, they require modern software solutions, and they require like maybe a lot of computational power. You can't do a lot of things on a 12-year-old ThinkPad, right? And just acting like Debian is gonna work perfectly for them out of the box, when that is almost never gonna be the case in my experience.
Yeah, that was me. That was me. I was somewhat still new to Linux, and Debian was the second Linux distro I ever tried after Ubuntu. And that's what I read online. It's like, oh, Ubuntu's based on Debian, so just use Debian instead. And I'm like, okay. As if they're like...
I really think...
What?
I really think that that's a huge reason why desktop Linux has taken so long to take off.
Because this whole open source world, there's like a million Linux distributions.
Right.
There's been random people that just like follow us on Twitter that I'll quickly just like check out their profile, and it's like, oh, I'm a developer for a Linux distro. And I look into it, and it's just like a fork of Fedora with like one feature they wanted. And it's like, oh, okay, so we made a whole Linux distro just to get this one feature in there. And that's how I feel like messengers are, and I feel like maybe a lot of things in the open source world, as you said, kind of do that. It almost devalues the original project and the amount of work that went into the original project, and it might make it harder for a consumer to make a decision. Like, it's much easier to tell someone, hey, why don't you move away from Windows to this open source operating system? It's this. Rather than move to Linux. You have a million options now.
Yeah.
Each of them have pros and cons. You now need to decide which one to move to. And it's like, well, I don't know, because they never used it before, and now it's like a whole thing.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the problem with Linux and a lot of open source stuff. A lot of people in the open source community are okay with using tools that for like one specific need, and they'll like switch between messengers depending on like which one is best for a specific use case, right? But not a lot of other people are willing to do that. And if there's not like an all-in-one app, they won't use any of them at all.